Today we have the Ayatollah of fantasy rock and roller with us today, Adam Rank. How you doing, Rank?
They look great in person, and I just can't wait till next year where we can pack it full of 25,000.
Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. I didn't know it was Ball Guys Day. It was being ranked. I mean, how do you lose?
This is the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast.
It's time to go behind the grind, powered by the Fantasy Points Media Group. And hey, on this week's show, we look to establish the run with one of the most influential people in this space. Maybe the greatest measure of a man is the imprint you leave behind. And guest after guest on this show have pointed towards Evan Silva as one of the most respected individuals that they have been fortunate enough to cross paths with. And now it is time for Evan to go behind the grind with us. How you doing, Evan?
What's going on, Matt? I'm ready to chop it up here.
Yeah. Well, if you're just catching the show now, make sure to go back, catch the Vipercast, episode 130. We kind of talked about some boom and bust players, but now we are going to get maybe some boom and bust moments from Evan Silva's career here. And we always got to start this off with music. We love ourselves some music. So, Evan, if you were a WWE superstar, maybe a closer coming down in the ninth inning, taking the mound, what is that intro music going to be?
Well, I could go one of two ways. I think I would do DMX, something from DMX or Rolling Stones, Give Me Shelter.
You gonna belt some tunes out? You gonna let some of those lyrics go for us, or we're gonna hold back?
No, I'm not gonna sing. No, I'm not gonna sing.
Hey, we always try for that, but now, so we've got that music. We know that intro music, but every single one of us, we all have that guilty pleasure song. That one song that probably stands out a little bit more than it probably should on our iPod or a Discman or whatever we're listening to. What is that one song? Is there like a little Britney Spears or a little Shakira? Is there something that like people are like, really, Evan? Really? That's on your playlist?
No, maybe it might be Amy Winehouse, but I think that everybody should have some Amy Winehouse on their playlist. I mean, she's phenomenal, or she was. R.I.P.
One of the other things we'd like to talk about here is sports. How did sports develop you as a youth? What was the importance of sports for you growing up?
Extremely, extremely important. And I wasn't like a very good athlete, but I definitely played all the sports. I think my favorite sport growing up was baseball. I was big into collecting baseball cards. Also have a ton of football cards and basketball cards. But going to like some of my earliest memories are like going to a Memorial Stadium, aging myself right here, but old Memorial Stadium in Baltimore before Camden Yards was around. He would like every time that one of the players would come up to bat, one of the Orioles would come up to bat, he'd like tell me the background on that player. So that really got me into like just being interested in players, and kind of led to a career in fantasy football. And now when I bring my daughter to the Cubs game, because she grew up, or she was born like right down the street from Wrigley, and she's a huge Cubs fan. Like I pass it on to her. I'll tell her the background on each player as they come up. You get into it.
So speaking of these players, and who was your favorite player growing up, whether it's baseball, football, whatever it is? Because I can assume that maybe Baltimore was your childhood team. Maybe you've transitioned to the Cubs now since you've moved to Chicago, and all life has kind of changed there a little bit. But what are some of your favorite players and teams kind of growing up? And hey, well, who's your daughter's favorite player?
Seiya Suzuki. The Cubs, they got him from Japan, and he was the NL Rookie of the Month in April. They signed him to a big deal, I think 5 years, and she's got his jersey, and so that's her favorite player right now. My favorite player growing up was Cal Ripken of the Baltimore Orioles. Moved to St. Louis for like high school, Albert Pujols, and now, I mean, the daughter's such a big Cubs fan that we have to that I have to be a Cubs fan now. So I mean, like I'm not going to root against her or teach her, try to teach her to be a Cardinals fan or an Orioles fan or anything like that. Like she gets to choose and she runs the show.
See, I brainwashed my children because I went the opposite of my old man. So I'm Canadian here, and hockey is kind of the first thing, the first love here.
Great sport,
my dad was a Leafs fan, so I automatically gravitated towards the Montreal Canadiens.
Wow.
But I made sure when my kids were young, it was everything Montreal on their head, on their jersey. I loaded them up just to avoid having children like me. So we got that kind of established there. Now, some teams like to ground and pound. Some like to use the pass to set up the run. How did you establish the run?
Well, I mean, I worked at Roto World NBC for like 10, 12 years and was able to build, a pretty good social media following and just a following overall. And I met Adam Levitan when we worked together at Roto World, and he kind of left Roto World before me, a few years before me. And like I had signed a contract, I needed to finish out the contract. And then when the contract was up, we decided to establish the run. And here we are headed toward our 4th season. And it's been awesome. It's been an awesome ride. I don't think we've left any meat on the bone. And we've expanded to golf coverage, and we have an unbelievable basketball coverage team, and and now we're kind of starting to seeing the headlights down the road for 2022 training camp.
I always love the early stories on when you create this new content deliverer, right? I mean, you already had the credentials. Adam already had the credentials to themselves. How was that conversation? How did that conversation go down between you two? Like, you know what? Let's put all our eggs in one basket here and see if we can develop something that people are going to want to consume here, especially for those who are just starting out in the fantasy industry right now, trying to create their own little piece, their own little niche in the market.
Right. Yeah. And there's a lot of opportunities for that, by the way. I think that Substack is like a good vehicle for people that want to take a shot on themselves. I've heard that you can keep, most of the money that you generate, and, it's a good way to, it's a good platform. I subscribe to several people's Substacks. But yeah, for me, I mean, Adam and I had we had developed like a good friendship, and, we were both like doing pretty well in the industry, and we had been talking about it for a few years, and then along came Taylor Cabey and Andrew Wiggins, and those guys. They had formed a website back during the poker days called Card Runners. They had even developed their own daily fantasy site. They had tried, and in some instances failed, but they had like learned the ropes of like the business aspect of it. I in particular had been working for a corporation that took care of a lot of those business aspects, and you know what I mean. So linking up with them, Adam and I could create content. Those guys can sort of handle like the business side. I mean, that wound up being a great partnership.
I like that, because I basically started a website just out of pettiness. And that's basically how mine came up. I mean, I was on the Scott Fishbowl thing as a fan, and I was looking around. I'm looking at some of these other content creators.
Right.
You're like,
I could do that. I could do that.
Yeah. I said, I've been doing this. I've already been doing it for free.
Right.
I might as well put my money where my mouth is. And yeah, my mouth gets me in a lot of trouble a lot of the time, saying, yeah, I can do that. I mean, that's how I ended up coaching like girls basketball for my daughters, saying, oh, anyone can coach this team better than, and yeah, that's what happens for me. That's my journey, and I like it, but hey, it's not for everybody. But let's talk about your journey and what are some of the biggest changes now than when you first started?
Oh, geez. I would say just the coverage of the actual teams. In a given city now, there could be 5 beat writers covering the team. I mean, for the Eagles, I think there's like 15. But when we first started, like during the off season in particular, there would be long stretches at Roto World, and Roto World is the nuts of Roto World is the player news blurbs. during the offseason, there would be stretches for like weeks and weeks where there would be no news about the Raiders. I mean, I think there was like a 2-month stretch one year, maybe like in 2007 or 2008, where we didn't have a single blurb on any Raiders player because they would move the beat writers like to go cover the Warriors. You know, there was nobody covering the Raiders for the San Francisco Chronicle or whatever at that time. And now that would never happen. I mean, Vic Tafur, you know, the guys that cover the Raiders, those guys have to be on it every day, you know, because the way that, I mean, the NFL is just kind of taken over. They dominate the offseason now too. Like there really is, I know it sounds cliche, but there really is no offseason. So that has been the biggest change, I would say. News is breaking all the time now. You know, there's no relent.
I think even like you mentioned that there about no off season. I think teams, NFL teams in particular, are starting to embrace the fantasy football aspect of everything. Yep. You've got now, I won't call them beat writers, but you got specific fantasy football writers to certain NFL teams right now. Like that's where we've actually gotten to that point here. And the fantasy football enthusiasts, they want to know everything all the time, what's going on with their teams. Because like you said, there is no offseason. And I kind of want to swing this back here because earlier we were talking about establish the run and that draft kit. You talked about your 150 board and how that's ever changing all the time. I mean, I just kind of came out with my little heat check, a very similar tiering type system, and I'm updating that every single day or as often as possible. But like you said, you have to do that. Without 150, that's what the consumers want. They want that daily update. They want us to try and stay ahead of their competition. So I think
for sure.
That's one of those biggest things. I mean, I think the quality of the consumer now has grown absolutely unbelievably compared to the old fax machine, magazine type days where you're going to the newsstand to pick up a magazine. Now you could actually submit your lineup while sitting on the toilet nowadays, right? I mean, that's where we've kind of gone as consumers in this fantasy football industry. We've kind of talked about that a little bit here, but when did you decide to throw your hat in and go full out that, you know what, I'm going to make fantasy football a career for me? And then how did you ever imagine it blowing up for you the way that it has? I mean, you mentioned 30,000 followers there on Twitter, being able to establish the run, the website, going from Roto World, NBC, all this kind of stuff. Did you ever imagine that when you first started out?
No. I mean, I graduated with a political science and philosophy degree, and I was going to go to law school, but then I even took the LSAT, but I was just like, I don't want to do any more school. So I started like doing construction, actually, putting in floors and work like framing with carpenters. I wasn't a carpenter, but like I would work with them. I'd be the guy. They'd be like, you know, go give me 10 2x4s now, you know, or not 10, like 70. You know, and you got to carry them 7, or some people will carry them 10 at a time. But, you know, I started doing that. And then I emailed Greg Rosenthal and just asked him for a shot. They let me work for free for 6 months leading up into a season. Then they were like, yo, we'll pay you $500 a month. And, you know, so I got in that way, and now I just like hustled, and I tried to like go on every podcast and, you know, create more content than anybody. And no, it just kind of happened naturally. You know, there was no like, oh, I want to grow up and be a fantasy football writer when I grow up, you know, but now people can do that. Actually, people can say, you know, or even, you know, they can do what you did and start their own thing. And, you know, because there's such a demand for it, can kind of, you know, quickly add, you know, followers or people that care about the stuff that they put out, you know. So I mean, it just happened naturally.
What was that aha moment? Like, this could actually pay off. This may actually work for me. This could actually lead me to speaking MIT Sloan someday.
Just, I guess, when I was able to support myself and live on my own, writing about fantasy football. You know, I guess that would be when that was, and that was, I don't know, age 25 maybe. And now I'm 39.
All right, I get it. But
Yeah.
how do you recharge in the off season? Because we just talked about this. We've kind of hit this over and over and over again. There is no off season anymore, and the need for consumption of fantasy football is growing daily. DFS, you mentioned that. You even talk about now venturing into soccer. I know some fantasy football websites have turned their attention to soccer, golf, all these other different areas of expertise. So, how do you charge, and when do you recharge?
I mean, there are specific points on the calendar where you can do that. Leading up to the draft, you can do it a little bit, but once the draft really gets in close, like especially because we do a lot of sports betting and NFL draft props are a huge. I mean, it's one of the most profitable for the consumer times of the year as well. And we've been absolutely crushing it for the last 3 years on NFL draft props. But you know, I mean, I don't know. That's kind of how I would describe it.
No, when do you, so even just a little bit further, when do you find that time? Because I know running the website, running these articles, this and that. When does, I mean, you get Wrigley Field. That's kind of that your work-life balance type thing. How do you establish that work-life balance then? Going to these baseball games with your daughter, hanging out, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, there are just specific times on the calendar, like after you get your NFL draft grades in or whatever, you know, and I get in the top 150, and you can take a little bit of a break, and then June is a good month on the calendar, and then July is a good month on the calendar until late July, which is when training camp starts. So you just got to kind of like know the calendar, and try to capitalize on the moments where you can breathe a little bit.
So when you sit back, maybe find that time to charge and rewind, you throw in the YouTube there, and like if you do, what's on your YouTube playlist? Like, is there anything crazy on there, like non-football related, or what's on that YouTube playlist right now?
YouTube playlist. I don't really watch a lot of YouTube, I guess. I'll just plug our YouTube. Okay.
Hey, that works.
Establish the Run on YouTube. We're trying to get the numbers up. I think we got, I don't know, maybe 15,000 subscribers, but we're working on building that audience and on the Instagram. And I think that some of the guys want to get into TikTok. But yeah, I don't, I'm not on the YouTube very much, I guess.
We're not going to see an Evan Silva TikTok anytime soon.
I'm not planning on it. Okay.
Fair enough. So obviously that's something that people will definitely know not to realize there. But what is something that maybe many people don't realize about you personally?
I think I'm good at ping pong.
Ping pong.
I'll go with that, I guess. Yeah.
A little bit of established run ping pong tournament there, and Evan Silva's going to come out on top.
Yeah, sure. No, I mean it's a fun game, and if you get into it, actually, it can be like a good workout. I mean, if you get like someone you can really rally against, and it's a lot of fun.
So I want to bring this back to your daughter here a little bit, because I have lots of kids myself, lots of daughters, and I'm pretty confident I've seen like every single Disney movie 3-4 times over. I'm sure you've probably gone through that process here as well. And we love our rankings here, right? We love our rankings on the Dynasty Vipercast. So I need to hear the Evan Silva top 5 Disney princesses.
Oh no, I don't know. I mean, my daughter, she's a little past that stage now. She's still a little bit into the American Girl dolls. But she's kind of moving out of that. Now she's like in her sports stage now. I mean, she wants to like go ride horses, so
it's such a much better stage, isn't it?
I don't remember any of the princesses. I don't remember any of them. I couldn't tell you one. I mean,
the daughter that goes on to sports is so much better than the Disney princess stage.
I know. Yeah, no. We're past that. Yeah, I don't. She refuses to get her hair cut because she says that she wants to be like, who's that? The princess that gets free out of the tower because of her
Rapunzel.
hair. Rapunzel, yeah. That's I don't know the princesses anymore.
I've still got it. It's like burnt into my memory. It's a terrible thing, actually. Now I know you do a lot of podcasts, a lot of interviews. I mean, sometimes we bump into someone that kind of surprises us one way or the other. Has there ever been an interview that you kind of went into thinking one way about someone, and then also they kind of surprised you? I know even yourself personally, I mean, you're a big kind of guy there, and a lot of people may be taken back a little bit. Well, they get to know you. I mean, you're one of the greatest guys out there. As far as everyone I've talked to on this show talks about how good your heart is when it comes to relationships and stuff. Now, is there anyone that kind of surprised you after meeting them?
I mean, I feel like that could be construed as like I didn't think of like highly of them before, and then that's a tough one, man. That's a tough one.
I mean, like I said, there's so many different things. I mean, it really works in the world when you're talking to players and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you get these preconceived notions of certain NFL players from whatever, but then if you get an opportunity to sit down with them one-on-one and kind of talk about their journey, it kind of changes your outlook on them. Oh man, he did it.
That's a good point. That's a good point. I'll say this, Bob Harris, who I know you've had on the show, he did an interview once. It was kind of like this with Matt Harmon, and that was a mind-blowing and kind of like inspiring interview that he did with Matt Harmon. Kind of like I think it was on the website called Backyard Banter. But yeah, and then I got to meet Bob in real life, and he's a great individual.
So much energy there, so much.
He's a stud.
I wish I had that kind of energy at my age, let alone doing what he does at the level that he does it at. I mean, he doesn't seem to burn out ever. It's absolutely amazing.
There was also an interview that Adam Levitan did with Kandia, who for a while was like known as the #1 DFS player in the world for a long time. And then he kind of got out of the game. And then Adam Levitan like kind of found him and was like, "Hey, you want to come on and talk about your journey through DFS and your journey through life and what drove you to become the greatest DFS player in the world?" And his story, Kandia's story, is unbelievable. So I would recommend to anybody that listens to this to go check that one out.
Well, that's great information right there, because I think everybody has that story, and it's just kind of listening to that. And everyone's story has a way of affecting someone else somewhere down the line there. Now, if you weren't doing this fantasy football thing, and maybe you go back to school, I know you didn't want to go back to school, but you're going to go into like the law kind of thing. You also did a little bit of carpentry, a little house building there. If you were not doing this fantasy football thing, what would you be doing?
Oh my gosh. I don't know, man. I haven't considered anything like that.
It's scary, isn't it?
I've been doing it for so long. I mean, I feel like, gosh, I don't know. I have a buddy who's like trying to start a car detailing business. He works like the night shift right now, and he doesn't spend enough time with his kid, and he's trying to start this. And I'm trying to help him start this car detailing business so he can work during the day, and be around his kid, and I'm helping him. So I'm kind of into that right now, like on the side. And he's super excited about it. Actually, he just detailed his first car this morning. The first car of the entire business.
Perfect. I mean, you got to take a little bit of sense of pride in that too, right? You're kind of part of it. You're in there. You're helping out, and you get to see one of your friends kind of having this kind of success here. Mm-hmm. We know that those relationships are important, and like I said, we've had multiple guests on this show talk about how instrumental you were in helping getting their career started. I'm sure there's going to be more as we bring more guests onto this Behind the Grind. It's like the coaching tree, right? The Evan Silva coaching tree. It's growing almost daily, but at some point, you kind of mentioned Rosenthal there a little bit earlier. Who were some of the guys, the key individuals that kind of helped you along your journey?
Yeah, Greg Rosenthal for sure, who was my boss hired me at RotoWorld. And then he moved on to Pro Football Talk. And then I kind of moved up the ladder with Chris Wessling, who passed away a couple years ago. Those two guys probably, and Adam certainly, for pushing me into starting Establish the Run. Those guys probably have had the biggest effect.
Yeah, like we got Adam, I think, coming on here next week. So we're going to have to get a little bit of dirt on him going into next week's show that I kind of surprised him with there. What have you learned through fantasy football? And more importantly, what has fantasy football taught you about yourself?
Well, fantasy football is a game about trying to make the best decisions. Anytime that you click a player in a draft, you're making a decision. If you accept or revoke the trade offer, that's a decision. Who are you going to start that particular week? That's a decision. You know, so poker's kind of like that too. And you can have all the right data points working in your favor and have a strong process and still get it wrong. The best bettors in the world only hit 62% or something like that. And they have the best process in the world, but they still get 38% wrong. So understanding that you're not going to get everything right, and that you have to kind of stick to your process and find a process. That's been probably I didn't really understand that concept when I first started writing about fantasy football, but I feel like I've fully embraced that concept now.
All about those decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any decision perhaps that you would kind of, if you were faced with it one more time, as far as your journey in the industry here is concerned, that maybe you may have changed a little bit or changed that? Okay, you know what? Maybe I would have done this a little bit different.
I mean, if I'm going to answer that, frankly, it would be like not signing a 5-year contract with NBC at one point. Although NBC did a lot for me as well. So, I mean, I it's not like there's any sort of ill will. It's just I signed like 5 years of my life away before I got the chance to do Establish the Run, and I probably should have started I should have started earlier.
I guess that. I mean, there's a certain sense of pride. Like when you see Establish the Run and what it has accomplished since you guys started that, what is that feeling for you like?
It's awesome, man. I went out and I had like 100 Establish the Run shirts printed, and I gave them to all my friends and my family. And my daughter wears like a pink Establish the Run shirt to school. So yeah, there's a high degree of satisfaction for sure.
There's always something different when you see someone else wearing your product, right? It just hits a little bit different. I mean, we all wear fantasy football kind of shirts here and there, but it's just something different when you see someone else wearing your stuff and you're like, oh, I didn't. Wow. Okay. Very good. Or reading your articles or something like that, or picking up a magazine off the newsstand for the first time, and there's your piece of information there. I mean, it just always hits a little bit different.
Yep.
Now before we head off, there's been all kinds of great information throughout this show here. Just one last piece of fantasy football advice that you would give to anyone who's watching the show right now, whether they're starting or whether they've already established themselves in this space.
It would be just to try to outwork everyone. And some people don't have the ability to do that. Maybe they probably have a full-time job, or they're in school or what have you. But there are still ways that that you can get ahead, and it's almost always through hard work, and putting together a good product. I mean, I think you're doing it right here, Matt. I mean, these graphics and this the show setup, it's excellent. I mean, it's really, really good, and that's one way that you can create a little advantage for yourself. You know what I mean? So, just outworking people and trying to put out the best content that you possibly can.
And then a little bit more advice here. I'm going to pick your brain a little bit more because a lot of the viewers here, and we know the fantasy football industry is individuals in that 25 to 45 type range. I mean, that's probably the biggest demographic here. So what is one piece of parenting advice that you can give those people? Anything. What's the one thing that you maybe learned to find the most valuable that you're like, whoo, glad I learned that one, or I wish I would have known about that a little bit earlier?
I would just say stack experiences with your kid, take him to the park, even if you're not feeling like doing it, go throw the football around. Our AC went out a couple weeks ago, and it was freaking 92 degrees in my house, and I couldn't get it fixed until the following Wednesday. So I was just like, listen, we're going to the Wisconsin Dells for the weekend because we're not going to be here you know, and it was just the most awesome 2-day little getaway because we had an absolute blast. We did it on the fly, and you know, that's something that, you know, she's going to remember. And you know, so that just try to, you know, you can do stuff, you know, like, you know, off the top of your head. Sometimes that's the most fun, you know, at the spur of the moment.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, appreciate you coming on the show, sharing your experiences, sharing a little bit of the story, and of course, this advice. I mean, we want to try and go a little bit beyond fantasy football. We want to kind of get a little bit more of that information out there, and hopefully, we've given people a little bit of an insight look into Evan Silva's career and his journey here so far. And I mean, it's still just getting started. I mean, it was established 4 years ago, like you said, but I mean, we're seeing the evolution of fantasy sports, and I cannot wait to see how much further established the run continues to grow in the next 2, 3, 4 years. And one of the ways that you guys continue to grow is that NFL draft kit, in which you guys are kicking off here again. I mean, 150 big board. What else are you getting with that product here right now?
Yeah, I'm working on the tiers, and there's going to be a constant, steady flow of articles from all the guys on the NFL team. We're adding NFL future props, and we've had really good success in the prop market, both in NFL and USFL and golf and NBA. So yeah, that's the crux of it, and it should be very helpful for you throughout the off season as it starts to get really updated here.
With that all being said, whatever the prop bet is set at for establishing the run, I'm going to bet the over, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Evan, for joining us.
Thank you.